Hey there, students. Welcome back to chemistry. This is the second section of chapter one. And as always, Beethoven, the COVID man, is always here to make sure I'm doing a good job. So put him over there. So what we're going to do today in chemistry is we're going to learn about the far-reaching aspects of chemistry in our lives. So what chemistry does for us is chemistry allows us to use different tools in different times. It allows us to learn and reshape and make our lives a little bit better as we understand things. So one thing that chemistry has done, we're going to talk about how all of chemistry today has impacted your life, whether you know it or not. So we're going to talk about those today. So the first thing we'll talk about, the first concept is chemistry has an impact on materials. Okay, what impact do chemists have on materials, energy, medicine, agriculture, the environment, and the study of the universe? So that's the question I want to answer today, or at least get you thinking about, is that chemists in the practice of chemistry is, and I want to say that when we talk about science, it is a practice. It is not the study of, even though that's what we think of when we think of biology, means the study of things that are alive, and things like physiology, the study of the human body and how it moves. But what I want you to think is as the practice, that chemists are practicing how to improve materials and energy and how it impacts the medicine. The practice of chemistry makes impacts on the agriculture and the environment and the study of our universe. So think of it as a practice. That is, when you think of practice, it means it's improving, it's changing, it's morphing. As new things come to light, as new understandings and new discoveries come to light, things change. So all of science can be thought of this way. So let's talk about materials. Okay, let's talk about materials. In 1948, a man named George de Mestral took a close look at burrs he saw on that stuck to clothing. He noticed that there was a natural phenomena of a plant that stuck to his clothing. He had this burr, a sticker. If you're from my part of the world, we call them stickers, or we call them hitchhikers also as well. They would stick to the clothing. Well, he patented a design for what's called a hook loop tapes. You might think of them as Velcro, and at the microscopic level, this is what Velcro looks like. It's tiny little hooks attached to some loops. And that's how Velcro works. So these are used in almost every day of your life. You probably have some sort of Velcro fastener. You may hang things up using Velcro. I use it all the time in my wood shop. Also, I use it a lot in the class. Velcro was brought after a material was designed based on something that occurred naturally in nature. Okay, so this illustrates two ways is that burrs belong to the microscopic world. So a microscopic world and a microscopic world. The macro are the larger world. We see objects that are large enough to see with our unaided eye, that we can see. Just like you're looking at a screen right now, you can see. So those stickers or those burrs or those hitchhikers were in the macroscopic world, things we can see with our unaided eye, not a telescope or not a microscope or a hand lens. The hooks belong to the microscopic world. What was on those burrs were the hooks. Okay, and they belong to the microscopic world, which means that those objects can only be seen under magnification, either magnifying glass or a microscope or something like that. So materials have been improved because of using natural things. Materials can be changed or morphed or even invented by scientists. Chemists play an essential role in finding ways to conserve energy and produce energy and store energy. Now, this whole idea of producing energy is a little bit of a misnomer in that we don't make energy, we just transform it from one thing to another, one process to another. Okay, storing energy in the sense of a battery and conserving energy means we're just going to use less of it. You use less of it per instance. All right. So conservation is one of the easiest ways to conserve energy is through a process called insulation. You have clothing on, thank the good Lord for that. You have more clothing on in the summertime than you do on the winter, because insulation, your clothing acts as a barrier to allow heat to flow. Sometimes you want heat to flow out when you're working out or outside. You want to sweat. You want that heat to get off of you in the form of perspiration, but also sometimes in the winter you want to hang on to your heat, so you might bring a blanket or a hoodie. So insulation is what's on side of a house that helps insulate, keep heat out or in, depending on the season, keep cool in or out based on the season. Your refrigerator or freezer is going to have some insulation to keep the cold in and the heat out. All right. Another type of energy is what's called sea gel. It's a modern form of insulation. Other forms were the fiberglass forms of insulation that you might see that pink stuff that's inside of walls, but another form is called sea gel, and it gets light enough to float on soap bubbles, so it doesn't add any mass or any structural components that need to be considered when they're used, but yet it is very efficient on maintaining insulation, not allowing energy, in this case heat, to flow through it. So that's another idea of chemistry coming into energy. The idea of burning coal, petroleum, or petrol, or gasoline, natural gas is a source of energy, and these come from what are called fossil fuels. Okay, but also oil from beans. Some soybeans can be used to make what's called biodiesel, so we can potentially grow our own fuel rather than harvesting it from the ground and all the environmental impacts and land use impacts and even causing some earthquakes because of the hydro fracking and things like that. Harvesting diesel fuel from soybeans is a promising potential. But sometimes, those of you who've taken environmental science with me, is that you still need petroleum products to grow soybeans. That pesticides and herbicides and the fuel that waters and stores and transports all the soybeans is still using diesel fuel. So the idea is that it makes some impact, but it's a more positive impact, but it's not a one-term solution. So that's one thing in science. There's not always one-term solution to problems. There might be several solutions to several problems. Storage, another type of when you think of energy, is storage. Battery is a energy storing device that uses chemistry, whether it's an alkaline battery, whether it's a rechargeable battery, a lithium battery. These are all things that's stored and they release the electric current when asked. So some applications for these may be in your phones. You see that your camera, phone, or your computer, or laptop will die over time. It'll take a certain amount of recharges, and then that battery begins to degrade. Battery technology has come a long way. It still somewhat needs to improve, but some batteries, depending on, could last several hours on your laptop, or maybe several days, depending on the use of your cell phone. So batteries store energy. So that is another, and that is based on a chemical reaction that's happening inside the battery. So we talked about materials, we talked about energy. Now we're going to talk about medicine and biotechnology. So the idea, if you think about anything that's happening in our culture these days, is medicine and biotechnology and how that relates to the care of people and the care of patients, the care of those who are being treated by doctors. Medicine and biotechnology is very much driven by an understanding of chemicals and how they work within the body. So there are 2,000 prescription drugs. These are effective. They interact with chemicals in certain ways. They affect cells in certain ways. They affect different types of, whether it's a blocker that doesn't allow a chemical reaction or hormone to be released, or it encourages some chemical reactions to occur depending on certain types of drug, whether it's a drug for depression, or if it's a drug for a blood thinner, or if it's a chemotherapy where you take a chemotherapy through a pill. All of these are tested and go through different trials, and they're tested such that they are deemed safe. There are always side effects with any type of medicine or drug, but they're deemed safe. So this is all involved with the chemistry, and particularly the chemistry of human bodies as medicines, or even medicines for your pet. They are prescribed such that they affect your body in the way, hopefully, that they're designed. Other types of materials can supply materials like artificial hips and knees. So they've come a long way over the last few decades. And artificial hips and knees are made of metals and plastics of worn out joints like a knee, like a shoulder, like a hip. And they can walk again without pain. So rather than being bone on bone, some of that can be replaced with some titanium and some plastic. So chemistry is involved in the medicine of helping people walk again. Some biotechnology, the idea of the Human Genome Project, the reason that things like the COVID virus was tracked and it was able to be found and able to be coded so quickly was because of the Human Genome Project, and is that there is a storehouse of information of breaking down the human DNA into about 30,000 different parts. And so this DNA, this discovery helped lead to more technology. So many things like you might have heard of things like CRISPR and how they're going to other types of technologies that might help treat different diseases and replacing DNA strands that are not that maybe have a misfunction to or a malfunction to them, or maybe a genetic malfunction that can be tweaked potentially using biotechnology here. Other types of apply to other products and processes. So biotechnology is thinking of how it affects biological processes. So when you think of that, biotechnology is thinking about the production of those processes. So we've talked about materials, we've talked about energy, we've talked about a little bit of medicine and biotechnology. Now we're going to talk about agriculture. Now, chemists have developed many crops that potentially could be safer, can be more productive, and the one thing is that productivity, it allows chemical soil test, allows how much, specifically how much um, herbicide or pesticide or fertilizers needed in one section of a field. So to this day, when a huge farm is laying down its pesticides and planting, it knows by tracking through GPS and doing soil tests almost in real time how much pesticide or herbicides need to be applied to that one section. So there's some good ideas here, and there's always an environmental impact and things like GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and are they completely safe? And how much pesticides that seem are safe now may not be safe in the future when after more tests are being done. So there's always, again, the science here is a practice. We're always practicing a science. But here, for this purposes, you see that chemistries help produce more food for more people on a given portion of land. And they also help to determine how much water it needs. So different genes for one in a jellyfish can be transferred to a potato and it can glow at a certain level when it needs to be watered. So imagine you only water your plants when they're glowing at a certain level. So that's just something that if you had it genetically coded within a potato, and then you would see it, it would be glowing kind of at night, or maybe when it's a little dim, and you'll know when to water, not to water. So that preserves and saves water. So it's a little different how chemistry, using something as from a jellyfish, the chemistry of a jellyfish, to help out agriculture and to save water. Okay, crop production. Sometimes they might do these little tubes right here, or these little wire wraps. They call them a plastic tube, but think of a wire wrap, and that this seems a chemical that the female pinworm emits to attract moths. So this interferes with the mating process. So this idea here that it protects the crop, that it emits something that'll keep away moths that shouldn't be there, that would attack this tomato, and less it would bring down the production. So this is using chemistry, the scent, a pheromone, to interfere with the process of reproduction of a pest on a vegetable. And then the environment. So we talked about materials, we talked about energy, we talked about medicine and biotechnology, we talked about agriculture. Now we're talking about the environment. Now, this idea of a pollutant is a material found in air, water, or soil that is harmful to a human or other organisms. Okay, so chemists using analytical chemistry can help identify which pollutants are present and potentially prevent pollution. So, using analytical chemistry, actually analyzing a soil sample or a water sample or an air sample, can determine which materials and pollutants and other molecules are present in a sample to determine what action may need to be taken. All right. So identifying these in the mid 1900s, things like lead, gasoline was known to be a poison or a pollutant. And then in 1971, the levels of lead was harmful to the development of children's brains. So even very, very small lead concentrations can really affect the nervous system of a growing child. So because of that, there were other things that were used to prevent lead poisoning, outlawing lead in paint, other outlawing lead in gasoline has brought that down, even though there are still lead problems in many of our cities today with lead pipes and lead paint that we're more aware. So the understanding of how chemistry, particularly a naturally occurring lead, that the word lead, the Latin is plumbus, okay, where we get the word plumber or plumbing from. So lead was used for thousands of years in plumbing and for pipes and that sort of thing. So replacing those pipes, allowing chemistry and environmental science and safety to help us understand that better. So percentage with elevated blood levels has decreased significantly from in the mid 1980s and 70s and 80s all the way to the 2000s, where that we still would want to do that more because even having one child with that is too much. But the point here is allowing chemistry was adding to the practice of safe environmental practices for children. And then lastly, the universe. The universe, to understand the universe, you have to understand chemistry. That data that's brought back, all the data that comes back from all the Mars expeditions and all the rovers and all the different instruments that are out there, satellites and all the different things moving around Venus, and they're moving around collecting data that is sent back. And a lot of it has to do with chemistry. Chemistry is, analyzing more than 850 pounds of moon rocks that were brought back, suggesting that there was maybe molten lava on the Earth based on the chemistry and the chemistry that makes up the minerals that makes up the rocks on the moon. Potentially molten lava covered the Earth. Recently, this is just recently, not even associated with the slide, that potentially there they found salt on Mars, and one of the missions that Perseverance is doing is to look at some salt and how the salt came, and potentially that there might have been water on Mars at one point. With water on Mars presents maybe life on Mars. So this idea of the presence of different chemicals can indicate whether there was life or maybe past events. Maybe they've been like similar to the moon, like a volcano or something like that. So that's our presentation for today. We learned about the materials, how chemistry affects materials, how it affects energy, how it affects biotech and medicine, how it affects agriculture, the environment, and lastly, the universe. So that's it for today. I'll look forward to seeing you guys soon.